After the death of Chicago Irish strongman Dion O'Banion, Frankie Yale said to his gang, "Boys, if they ever get me, give me a send-off like that." Frankie Yale was the quintessential gangster. He palled around with Al Capone when they were both members of the violent New York street gang known as the 5 Points Gang. Born in Brooklyn in 1885, Frankie Yale, as an adult, would rise to the top of the New York underworld. He joined the 5 Points Gang in the late 1890s, where his reputation as a cold-blooded killer became infamous. In 1908, he aligned himself with Johnny Torrio, extorting money from fresh-off-the-boat Italian immigrants under the threat of kidnappings, bombings, and murder. In 1918, Yale took over the Unione Siciliane, the powerful fraternal organization which had turned crime cartel at the direction of its former president, the Blackhander Ignazio Saiedi, also known as Lupo the Wolf. After assuming power with the Union, Yale began taking murder contracts to supplement his income, a forerunner, if you will, to Murder Incorporated. When asked by a policeman what he did for a living, Yale snarled, "I'm an undertaker." Yale became business partners with Johnny Torrio of a bar they called the Harvard Inn. He operated this dive throughout his career, even after Torrio left New York for Chicago to help his uncle, Big Jim Colosimo, run his rackets in the Windy City. It was estimated by police that over 24 men were murdered on the premises between 1918 and 1928, many by the hand of Frankie Yale. Yale was not only a bootlegger and a rum runner, he also diversified and began manufacturing cigars. He and his goons forced retail stores to sell his cheap tobacco, which was considered so bad that an idiom of the day, "It's a Frankie Yale," was used to refer to something, anything, that was cheap and of low quality. Due to his friendship with Capone, Yale was his chief supplier of bonded whiskey during Prohibition. If Capone needed a favor, needed someone whacked, and didn't want it traced back to him, he would call up his old pal Frankie Yale to do the job. Yale would breeze into Chicago, make the hit, and be back home in time for supper. In fact, many crime historians believe that it was Frankie Yale, along with Capone gunners Albert Anselmi and John Scalise, who shot Irish mobster Dion O'Banion in his flower shop on November 10, 1924. Everything in Frankie Yale's world was cruising along just fine until he and Capone had a falling out. Yale refused to endorse one of Capone's candidates for the office of president of the Chicago branch of the Unione Siciliane. Capone coveted this office because of the power it exuded. He himself was unable to join the fraternity due to the fact that he was a Neapolitan and not a Sicilian. But if he could name the man who was to have the power, he could control the man. As time went on, Yale objected to other candidates Capone put forth. As their friendship degenerated, liquor shipments Capone ordered from Yale began to be hijacked before they left the state of New York. Capone suspected Yale was behind it. In order to make his case, Capone sent James F. D'Amato to spy on Yale. D'Amato sent word to Capone that his suspicions were correct, but he didn't live long enough to report to Scarface directly. Yale had D'Amato killed. Capone then sent Yale an unsigned wire stating, "Someday you'll get an answer to D'Amato." That answer came on July 1st, 1927. Yale had received a phone call which caused him to bolt out of the door of the speakeasy in which he was frolicking with friends. Dressed in a soft gray fedora, pinstripes and spats, He sped down 44th Street in Brooklyn when he was suddenly overtaken by a large touring car bristling with gunmen. They opened up on Yale with everything they had, including a Thompson machine gun. Yale was cut in half, and his car crashed wildly, slamming into a house. A block away, the hit team dumped their guns, including the Thompson machine gun. It was traced back to a gun supplier in Chicago who was known to supply guns for Capone. This was the first time a machine gun had been used in New York, and Scarface wanted the New Yorkers to know who had taken out Yale. Just as he had requested a few years earlier, his send-off was extravagant. Yale's silver coffin cost around $12,000, and 28 trucks of flowers followed him to the cemetery. On the last truck, a giant wreath bore the ominous inscription, "We'll see them, kid."